Another thing the battle in Seattle sounded the alarm for, a la Paul Revere, instead of "the British are coming, the British are coming, the Frankenfood's coming, the Frankenfood's coming." You know, Europe has been hip to this for a long time, and the protests have been fierce over there against the imposition of genetically modified, or should I say genetically mutilated, GM food over there. And there's a lot of it has been snuck into our food already here. Almost every brand of cornflake, for example, and believe it or not, a lot of vegan soybean products. Be careful, because they're using that in some of those too. Time magazine reported that 81% of the people they polled want labeling of genetically modified Frankenfood put on our food. That is a battle that can be won. But the opposition is fierce at a time when Bill Clinton and King George II and Al Gore and especially Tony Blair in Britain are owned and operated by Monsanto for all practical purposes, who are one of the leading pioneers of Frankenfood. And what they don't want you to know is not all the Frankenfood experiments are working very well either. There was the King Salmon Company in New Zealand that tried to make some Frankenfishies. They grew 5 times their normal size and had so many things wrong with them and health problems and who knows what kind of arms and flippers growing out of them that they didn't even let those things out. They took every single one of them and destroyed them. It was so bad. This is what can go wrong with Frankenfood. And on the other hand, damage control is in operation big time on Frankenfood. Check out the current cover to Time magazine. 1 million kids a year could be saved with this new strain of rice, but environmental activists don't want it to happen. No reason to think they're not going to try and do the same thing with the net. And as a means to that end, watch out for something in Congress right now, House Resolution 833, which is a little rider attached to a bankruptcy bill, which according to Rock and Rap Confidential would allow the government to break into anyone's house at any time without a warrant and without ever telling you they've even been there, to check your hard drive to see what you got on there. And to plant a program in your hard drive that would automatically transmit all your keystrokes to the government if they want to. And one of the sponsors of this bill is the Clinton administration. Another reason we need to put the Democratic Party out of its misery when they lie to us like this. What a long, strange trip it's been, ladies and gentlemen. I never thought I would make so much effort and be so stoked to go to the Republican convention. But these are the times we live in, as some of the people organizing the protests in the Independent Media Center who are older put it. This only comes around once every 30 years or so you kind of got to be there. This has been building, especially in Europe, for years. The first outbreak, as we all know, that not even the straight media could keep a lid on and pretend didn't happen, was in Seattle last fall, when people who had about zero interest in how high finance actually works suddenly showed up by the tens of thousands to vent their opinion about the World Trade Organization and the corporate agenda in general. We saw it on April 16th against the World Bank and the International Monetary Fund with white-collar genocide policies that put third world countries further and further and further and further and further into debt. People who had been demonstrating against the World Bank, the International Monetary Fund for years said usually they got 100 to 200 people at the annual gatherings. This year they got what, 20,000, 30,000? Obviously something is up. More and more people are beginning to notice that government at all levels is often bought and paid for, and they have nothing to say about the policies. For example, all of a sudden a guy with something of a progressive track record way back when becomes mayor of your town and suddenly decides that they should level Chinatown to build a $1.3 billion monument to one of the most incompetent teams in Major League Baseball. This is not a sign of good judgment on the part of Mayor Street, but I think there's more to it than that. Somebody's prodding him to do it the same way if you suddenly get in the White House and find out that maybe old Ross Perot was right for once. I mean, I thought the only value he had in running for president was proving that there really was a flying saucer crash in Roswell in 1947 and the alien still walks amongst us. But no, he moaned and groaned about budget deficits, and every country in human history has had them and still seems to thrive, often a lot better than ours does. But those debts are in bonds. You know, when you buy U.S. savings bonds, you're bailing out the government spending too much money on the military and the prisons, basically. But most of the people who own those bonds are bond traders on Wall Street, so they can say, well, you want social policies and reversing the income gap that we don't like? Well, guess what we'll do if you try that? We're going to call in all our bonds and you're going to be instantly bankrupt. That's how they can strangle people behind the scenes and make sure the social policies are to their liking. And I suspect with city fathers, especially in a town as famous for its corruption as Philadelphia is, that is no exception. But I've been through some stadium politics in San Francisco too. That was what got me back into voting, actually. I mean, I dutifully voted for Jimmy Carter when I was 18. Regardless of the halo around his head now, he was a conservative enough president that even my dad refused to vote for him in 1980 and voted for Barry Commoner instead. So that, and then having to choose between Dianne Feinstein and someone even worse for mayor of San Francisco, and Reagan and Mondale, what kind of choice was that? They were both actors. One played John Wayne, and the other played the whiny loser. And voters thought they were making their own choice the whole time, or that that was the only choice they could make. What got me back into registering to vote, aside from a little talking to from Frank Zappa, was what fun it was to vote down baseball stadiums. The Giants have always been pretty arrogant, and at the time their owner, who demanded the public pay for the stadium, was keeping a building right in the middle of downtown vacant for tax write-off reasons. So I'm going to give this guy a goddamn stadium. I'm going to show up and vote. And so then I got back into it. The Giants lost 4 stadium votes, I might add, all publicly funded. 2 in San Francisco. Okay, bye-bye, we're going to move to San Jose, who then votes them down. Okay, we're going to put it in Silicon Valley. They'll give us a stadium. No, they won't. So finally, our swashbuckling wheeler-dealer of a mayor, Willie Brown, managed to ram through a stadium that was privately funded, although the city spent a lot of gazillions of dollars on the infrastructure around the stadium, which they don't even count in when they tell you the budget of what the stadium is going to be. But the stadium, I believe, was in the 150 to 300 million range. I could be wrong. So then, quickly, true to the scam, a baseball-only stadium, well, what about the 49ers, man? Owned by Eddie DeBartolo, whose grandfather was allegedly the Al Capone figure for the Cleveland area. You know, he wasn't going to take any chances. He's based in Youngstown, Ohio. He knows how to get things done. Brought in his own operatives to make sure the election went his way, because this wasn't just a 49ers stadium, and there would be a mega mall attached, which would require paving a state park by the ocean to do it, owned by Eddie DeBartolo, who owns all those Mills malls. Any mall with Mills on the end is one of his. I think there's 1 or 2 around here, actually. He's made billion gazillions on malls and could easily put up the whole stadium himself, but it's an ego thing, man. So the public must submit and buy the 49ers a stadium or they'll move to LA, as if LA would ever want to root for the 49ers. I mean, that had me laughing almost as hard as when the Seahawks were threatening to move to LA, or the Denver Broncos were going to move to LA unless they got another stadium. Same scam in every town. I'm sure they'll threaten to move the Phillies to North Carolina soon if this doesn't work. Not that long a drive if you really want to see them that bad. See them lose that bad. So anyway, we have this stadium mega mall, and DeBartolo operatives come in and set things up so the people in the neighborhood around where they're going to put up the stadium, the ruins of Candlestick Park, got to vote 30 days in advance. And election judges all over town on the real election day were dressed in 49er merchandise. Blatant violations of the law, but of course the Secretary of State in California finds nothing wrong with these practices. But thankfully then Eddie DeBartolo got caught in a bribery scheme in Louisiana to try and grease the way through a former governor to get to build one of the showboat casinos. Which is weird too. People like Pete Rose are banned from sports forever for gambling. But here's a guy who owns casinos who got to run a football team. But not anymore. He hands it to his sister, trusts her to take care of it while he beats the charge. She then takes the team away from him in a lawsuit and lets her husband run it. So DeBartolo is gone and the stadium is just sitting there. No ground has been broken yet. But giant football stadium, attached mega mall was budgeted at about $440 million. The point I'm making is Street is saying $1.3 billion for the stadium for the Phillies. Where is that other $900 million going to be going? It's not going to the stadium. So make sure that this is something that gets voted on publicly and gets voted down, or this entire city is going to look like Kensington and Fishtown with a gleaming stadium and a round jail in the middle. Because there's no money for anything else. And I mean, Al Davis keeps moving the Raiders from town to town, back and forth. It's like, you better give me more luxury boxes. Fuck the real fans. We need more luxury boxes. Just like ancient Rome and the gladiator shows. The privileged rulers sit behind glass and no longer have to mix with the peasants. And then the guy who runs the Baffler magazine pointed out that time up in the Meadowlands when football fans started throwing snowballs at the San Diego Chargers and knocked a coach unconscious and stuff, why didn't they turn around and snowball the luxury boxes? Anyway, enough on stadiums. The point made, if you blow all your money on stadiums and prisons and a new Star Wars system or whatever that both Bush and Gore support, there's not going to be much money left for anything else. Of course, they'll keep the area around Independence Hall and the Liberty Bell nice and shiny, just in time for the corporatists who cracked the Liberty Bell and crack it evermore to come to town for their convention. I came in both to, of course, check out the festivities, and this time I've been invited in by the Independent Media Center, specifically Free Speech TV, to try my hand at being a TV reporter and an anti-pundit, I suppose. When you support things like Free Speech TV and Independent Media Center and Democracy Now! On radio and or TV, you get, instead of the Today Show, after Bush's speech, you got me as the color commentator analyzing the thing. You know, I read it the night before. I didn't get to see it because I was out doing something else, and then just got enough of a whiff of Bush on the screen that, boy, was I glad I didn't have to sit through any more of him. Americans generally seem to choose their presidents by which of the two options offered they can most stomach having to look at on TV for the next 4 to 8 years, and that's as far as it seems to go these days. One columnist said about his father way back when, how could so many women have voted for somebody who reminds women of their ex-husband? But this one, the same thing, only just he still comes across as like a spoiled frat boy trying out amongst his friends for the college debate team or something. America's gonna stand strong. And don't mess with Texas. China invades Taiwan, don't mess with Texas. Vice President would be Dick Cheney, who, among other things, as Secretary of Defense under King George I, ordered Colin Powell to draw up plans to nuke Baghdad. His wife makes Tipper Gore look like somebody you would actually trust by comparison. She was head of the National Endowment for Humanities under part of Reagan and Bush's term for 7 years and denied grants to any education project that looked like it might be too political, especially ones that want to invite in any multiculturalism into the curriculum that didn't say America is great and weren't we wonderful for killing the Indians. In other words, war on the so-called politically correct to bring back and entrench the patriotically correct, according to people like Lynn Cheney and the religious right. This is where she comes from. So we've had one of the two shindigs, and then in LA we're going to have the other one, and even the networks are covering them less and less than they used to because they're so boring, and no matter how often you trot out Hank Williams Jr., who disgraced both his father and his son by appearing at such a slimy event. Who was that local band who played on there, the Interpreters or something like that? What does this say? Surely they tried to get the Stone Temple Pilots or Blink-182 or Korn or Fleetwood Mac or Jimmy fucking Buffett or something. None of them showed up to play for the Republicans. Not even B.B. King will fall for that anymore. So they have to get some local spoiled band to do it instead because none of the big folks will show up. I thought that was very, very interesting. So that means there's a reaction, especially when you recoil at the sight of King George II and just how red that neck really is. You know, we basically have a cross here between Dan Quayle and the Dukes of Hazzard, with the guy who wanted to nuke Baghdad telling him what to do behind the scenes. But is Gore any better? They're all saying, well, we better get behind Gore then and make sure that Bush doesn't get in. The fear Bush signs that were being held up certainly do have a point, don't they? But how different is Prince Albert really from King George II? And the reason I bestow them those titles is they both come from old money, very wealthy families who've been monkeying with politics to screw the rest of us for generation after generation. I mean, the Gores date clear back to the Civil War. But their job isn't to try and fix things or lead us to a new tomorrow or come up with a new beginning, to borrow a line that King George II borrowed from Mr. Bill I in '92. Their job is to protect old money, period. Meanwhile, I know I've said this again and again, but now people are actually going out and doing it. Don't hate the media, become the media. And that's what Free Speech TV was about. I gave a name to some of this where everybody shows up with their camcorders and catches the police doing things like Rodney King beating Thomas Jones. CNN says no rubber bullets in Seattle, and then it goes out on the net an hour later, footage of rubber bullets being fired, and CNN has to change their story. What I call that now is the camcorder truth jihad. Anyone can join. All you have to do is pick up your camera, catch somebody doing something that CNN won't admit that they've done, get it on the net or out through Free Speech TV networks or Independent Media Coalition, and voila, you're part of the truth jihad, helping expose a better tomorrow and helping reclaim the media as the fourth branch of government through basically guerrilla media. But if you really get cool with it and add some interesting angles and spice and some humor, it can be infotainment. And one of the things they had me do was go down to this PolitiFest that was down in one of the halls, the little exhibit for people who couldn't get into the convention but wanted a good whiff of Americana and all. Anybody go to PolitiFest? Oh, man. I was calling everybody I knew as soon as I got, you've got to go, you've got to go. This is so twisted. Mutter Museum, nothing. Go to the PolitiFest if you want to see really warped stuff. You know, what the Don't Mess with Texas and Dick Cheney crowd thinks Americans should think their country looks like, basically. You could like have your picture taken waving on the steps of part of an Air Force One, which looked a lot like a crashed piece of wreckage because they only had part of it in there. And watch out for this in the future. Now that they can move stuff around in Photoshop on computers so you can have people who've never seen each other look like they're talking together and been caught live on camera. The first of these I saw was Abe Lincoln, Muammar Gaddafi, and Reagan having dinner together. And it looked totally real. And my message there is, think about that every time you see a photo in the straight media. Is it real or is it not? Even the Elian Gonzalez one of him crying melodramatically is the admittedly typical U.S. Gestapo tactics to take the kid away from his loony relatives. I don't know if that photo's real. I don't even know if Elian Gonzalez is real, for that matter. I mean, it's such a heart-wrenching story. There's been enough baseball pitchers washing ashore. Let's try a little kid this time. And preoccupy the country with poor little Elian Gonzalez and evil Fidel for months on end so we don't have to talk about anything else. That's how corporate media works. And not a damn thing about homeless families with less money than Elian's dad is making in Cuba sitting out on the streets begging for change in cities like this one and the one I come from. That's not news. After all, a picture of that next to an important advertiser in the newspaper, and they might just cancel their ads. We can't have that. Oh, back to PolitiFest. I've only just begun in the voyage to PolitiFest. Luckily, Phil over here from DUTV and the Independent Media Coalition came with me. Along with John and Sam from the Kensington Welfare Rights Union, who are part of the IMC, and some others. Yes, let's hear it for the Kensington Welfare Rights Union. Even that type of resistance is in a way becoming the media, because the corporate media is not going to admit that there's that many people hurting, or that when people get cut off of welfare, and more people are, and it was really coming down in 2001, what do you do when you don't have a place to live anymore? Sell drugs? Yes, basically. The people at KWRU, the Welfare Rights Union, were telling me the largest sources of income in this part of town are welfare, and the close second is drugs. And it's going to grow when people get thrown off. And of course, maybe then there'll just be more prison cells for the people selling the dope. And oh God, don't get me started on that, at least not for another half hour or so. Okay, back to PolitiFest. What else did they have there? Oh, you could be photographed signing a bill in the Oval Office, which thanks to the camcorder truth jihad, I got up there and got out that very first piece from my first spoken word album that Ice-T sampled later on the Freedom of Speech album, and the DOC did it later. We interrupt this program with a special bulletin. America is now under martial law. All constitutional rights have been suspended. Well, we interrupt this program with a special bulletin. America's now under martial law. Don't mess with Texas. Stay in your homes. And back to Photoshop, you could get your picture taken and then they'd morph it on computer so it looked like you were hanging out with King George II and everybody was having a good old time. I didn't get one of those done. Partly my stomach began to boil. We got there pretty late and we had priorities. So the longest line was Anchorman for a Day, where you could be videotaped, complete with teleprompter, telling you what to say, standing in front of a backdrop of a political convention floor, pretending you're Sam Donaldson, who I got to accost on the street, by the way, with a camera as well. I got Donaldson, I got Arianna Huffington, God, who else? I'm spacing out. That band who opened to the Interpreters, I got some of them too. If you got a chance to play in front of 40,000 people, you'd take it, wouldn't you? Wouldn't you? Wouldn't you? We did it for exposure. Exposure. But anyway, anchor man for a day, and this was hilarious. Starting with the second volunteer I'd interviewed, there's tons of volunteers working for the convention. I forgot to bring my volunteer handbook, too bad, because I was going to read you the regulations for volunteers driving golf carts, among other things, both on golf courses and in parking lots, because of course Republicans don't walk to the convention. Somebody else takes them there in a sedan chair, golf cart. I asked these people, okay, you're volunteering. Here it is, the city of Philadelphia, who doesn't have any money, found $7 million to put into this convention. The state put in $7 million. Corporate sponsors upped the ante to $40 million. Why are you doing this for free for these people who have $40 million bucks and are too cheap to pay you? And the guy, really young guy, might have even been a teenager, manning the line and handing out the teleprompter script at Anchor for a Day, said he was doing it to save the babies. And how godless Al Gore was, even though in this election the religious right wins either way unless Ralph Nader gets in, because both Gore and Bush are born-again fundamentalist Christians. And they both have a well-connected society wife who's down with the religious right and all. Both of them do. You know, both of them have been wearing Jesus on their sleeve, too. I mean, what would Jesus do? God, what would Gore do? Another thing I learned from talking to them and other anti-abortion zealots is their new tactic is that they all seem to have the same memorized, robotic, Marilyn Manson death metal level graphic description of partial births abortions that they recite on cue as fast as they can, like an auctioneer, to get you too to want to drop everything you're doing to block clinics and somehow save babies that way. Even though this guy and the other ones I interviewed later, they didn't give a damn about them once they were born. It was only the unborn that interests these people. And then, as the line snaked around, there were the other people being anchor for a day. The little kids trying to read the news, I mean, that was pretty cool. That was touching. And then there was this one woman who was up there when we first got in line who was following the teleprompter script and making all these lewd gestures, even stroking her crotch at one point. And she was, I would say, a little too overly tanned and in her mid-50s. So we interviewed her afterwards. It turned out, you know, she was in the business, as they say. She is a professional dancer and apparently one time part of an escort service. And this is a story we were trying to get to the bottom of, is find some of these $2,000 a night escorts that they'd been flying in to service these lonely Republican wankers during the convention. The closest we got was phillyexotics.com, but we didn't get to interview any of the people who'd been brought in and all. But she would do, because earlier I'd interviewed Nina Hartley nude in a porno store talking about freedom of speech, and she thought Republicans were lousy lovers. She wanted Peter Jennings because he was such a honey bunny. But this woman said, oh no, Republicans are great in bed. Once you get them between the sheets, it's just a matter of how they make love and all. Okay, what was the strangest assignment you were ever hired for? Oh, that's easy. I was brought in by a pilot to do him in the cockpit of an airliner at 20,000 feet. I fly home tomorrow. I'm a little worried about this. So then I got up there and, oh, does anybody ever change the script here? The worker's kind of bored by now after 2 days. Oh, no, not really. And so I got up there. The rapture is here! The rapture is here! People are flying off the street up into heaven, just like in one of those Jack T. Chick religious comics. But down here on the convention floor, the Republicans have been left behind. They're panicking. They're waving money at God, but He doesn't want them in heaven. I was trying to make it like the Hindenburg crash and stuff, and then I ran out of stuff to say, so I let it go and went on to, speaking of the rapture, past the Morph Your Picture with King George II booth to the Money Changers. And what a motley crew of money changers in the temple we had here. Forget the exhibits of a history of presidential footwear that they had in there. You'd find more tasteful knickknacks at Graceland than they had in these booths. All kinds of George W. Bush knickknacks and red, white, and blue felt cowboy hats and stone-looking plaster bust of King George I that didn't even look like him for $135. Coffee table books on George and Barbara Bush. Coffee table books on their goddamn dog. Somebody else was hawking red, white, and blue flashing beads, made in China, of course. And then another book stall, this is where I really scored from the money changers, God, Guns, and Rock and Roll by Ted Nugent. No free-for-alls here. Ted has very specific plans for our youth. He has a little camp for kids where he teaches them how to shoot everything and stuff. And the first blurb on the back is from Charlton Heston, who has never been as entertaining in his entire career as he is now, I might add. People who want gun control are part of a New Age conspiracy to turn the world into a godless Sodom? I don't think so. I mean, that would be more interesting than the corporate world order, I grant you. And then Kirk Gibson, a baseball legend, at the bottom. Don't let the ponytail fool you. Read, learn, and join the cause. And what is the cause here? Let's get to the couple biblical quotes. The thin blue line, one ass to risk. He's good with those little one-liners. I will give him. Your life starts from point A and ends at point B. Kick maximum ass. We're talking deep here. Among the chapter headings are, want to go to a gun and knife show? I'll open my jacket. Tres venison hombres, handgun hunting in Africa. My son the pig killer, how proud can a dad get? That is a chapter title. Nuge's message to kids, page 289. Here we go. If God didn't want us to eat pork, why would he have put all that meat on pigs and deal with their stinking porcine behavior on Noah's Ark? God, he's even deeper than Charlton Heston. Oh, what else? Oh my God. I haven't even got back to Tipper's book yet. Not a gangbanger, graffiti vandal, dope geek, laughable saggy pants rapper, or sour-faced punk to be found in the Nugent family. Nuge's message to kids. When I get kids together at my Ted Nugent camp for kids, I give them the full metal gospel, something like this. Greetings to my fine spirit of the wild, youthful blood brothers all. Do not think for one all-American working hard, playing hard, rocking hard, hunting hard, shooting hard, living strong minute that I don't think all of you young Americans every wild day of my adventurous life. Does that mean he thinks of kids every time he shoots another deer? He's straight edge, apparently. I celebrate each and every day of my joyous life with such intensity because I am 52 years clean and sober. So there you get the book on the Nuge. I can take no more. I crashed the Democratic Convention. And at first I got a floor pass that they give you for 20 minutes at a time. You had to turn in your regular press pass and your ID. And if you didn't bring it back on time, no more floor passes for you, I guess. went down on the floor to get a quick roll-in, as they call them, for the evening broadcast of Crashing the Party on the Independent Media Center. And on the convention floor, I, honest to God, felt like I had walked into the Truman Show. That I was trapped among all these Trumanoid Democrats here who all had that kind of zombified look on their face. Just like the Truman Show, everybody's acting, nobody's real. Sure enough, there's a dome on the whole thing. What if I can't escape? Jim Carrey got out, but then again, he could afford to. It was during a break in the speakers, so they were all just mindlessly waving little yellow Gore signs, boogieing to some of the worst music I have ever heard in my life. So bad, I actually wish they were playing Fleetwood Mac again instead. Yes, one thing's viewer out there you can be sure of. Democrats have terrible taste in music. I mean, after all, Bill Clinton, packaged as the rock and roll president, once said his favorite recording artists were Michael Bolton and Kenny G. Then they went on an 8-year crusade to Michael Bolton and Kenny G-ify the rest of us, which is going to get a lot worse with Lieberman and Tipper's husband and all, not to mention King George II. Then I left the Truman Show and went into the upper deck to watch the rest of the festivities. And imagine my nausea and horror when, just like the Nuremberg rally, the famous one in Triumph of the Will, the Leni Riefenstahl propaganda masterpiece that all American television seems to be based on now, 5,000 delegates on cue pulled out these signs saying, "Tipper rocks." Waving them enthusiastically, "Tipper rocks, Tipper rocks, Tipper rocks." And then I noticed, just like David Letterman or a game show, there were these marquees up above the seats flashing "Tipper rocks, Tipper rocks, Tipper rocks," just like an applause meter on a game show or whatever. It was hard to find them because there were so many corporate logos scattered everywhere in this convention hall called the Staples Center, named after an office supply chain instead of some civic leader or anything. Another common omnipresent corporate tactic now. This was what I had to put up with. Tipper rocks, Tipper rocks. What a brazen rewriting of history this is. We know what the truth is, but we're just going to pretend this is it, and that's what you're all going to believe from now on. Tipper rocks, Tipper rocks. If you recall, oh, don't do that now. Ladies and gentlemen, for those of you with a memory longer than the last episode of Survivor, Tipper doesn't rock. They've given her over a decade's worth of making over. But not everybody forgets so quickly that not only does Tipper not rock, she's very anti-rock. And if you like Tipper Gore, you'll love Joseph Lieberman. Joseph Lieberman, Gore's vice presidential pick, is like Tipper Gore on crack. He has taken over the anti-music crusade in the Senate, holding not one but 2 committee hearings chaired by his ally Senator Sam Brownback of Kansas. And at the first hearing in '97, guess who was called as an expert witness by this committee? Joseph Lieberman, who went on and on about the decay of society and how it was caused by music and wicked television and video games, and ended his talk by saying that Marilyn Manson must be dropped immediately. He, the high moral Lieberman, had the right to tell Interscope Records who to blackball. That was his attitude. And they held a second hearing later where they brought in the woman from Arkansas to blame Tupac and Bone Thugs for the kids' shooting spree there, and were trying to claim that school violence was caused by music that Joseph Lieberman doesn't like. And he has help with this too. His main allies are William Bennett, George I's former drug czar, a man so bigoted that as drug czar, he demanded public beheadings of drug dealers and said he had no moral problem with that, and called for rounding up youth from Washington, D.C., which is an almost entirely black city, and locking them on barges in the Potomac River to fight drugs. That is how far off the scale William Bennett is, but Lieberman is perfectly comfortable with this guy. Another ally, C. Dolores Tucker, a former civil rights activist who's now gone way over into Clarence Thomas land, and among other things, later, to add to a family's grief, sued the estate of Tupac Shakur because Tupac had written a song about her when she was attacking his music trying to get it banned, called Why Do They Call You Bitch? Her lawsuit essentially claimed that it had caused her to fear for her life because gangsta rap is automatically violent and promotes violence in others, therefore she was going to get knocked off because of music. And loss of consortium was the phrase in the lawsuit, which essentially meant that from the grave, Tupac Shakur had ruined her sex life. 3 cheers for Tupac Shakur, ladies and gentlemen. On August 8th, after getting the vice presidential nomination, Lieberman went on the Larry King Show, where he blamed all the high school shootings on Doom, Quake, and of course your friend and mine, Marilyn Manson. Then said, and this is a quote, "This matter is going to be something that Al and Tipper and Hadassah, Lieberman's wife, and I, are going to work on because we care about the moral future of our country." So she, meaning Tipper, is going to be a great partner in this effort. The year before, in '99, Lieberman and his pal Senator John McCain introduced in the Senate the 21st Century Media Responsibility Act that would basically impose a one-size-fits-all rating system on music, films, videos, and computer games, rating the intensity of violence. I wonder how McCain would get around that when he talked about all the people he killed from his fighter plane in Vietnam. Companies that violated Lieberman and McCain's labeling requirement and did something they didn't like, number one, every single thing put out would have to be recalled so it could be labeled within a year of the bill passing, and anything that violated the labeling requirement, any label who put out a CD, big or small, would face fines of $10,000 a day. And imported CDs and other products that didn't use Lieberman's label, meaning my stuff, would become illegal. And on May 30th of that year, C. Dolores Tucker, William Bennett, and Lieberman put out their latest blacklists of artists they thought should be blackballed and they didn't approve of. Blackballed, almost all of them were black. Gee, what a surprise. The usual suspects were on there: Wu-Tang, Notorious B.I.G., Ghetto Boys, Dog Pound, Tupac, Cypress Hill, token death metalers, Cannibal Corpse, although only one metal band made the list. And get this, guess who else was on Lieberman's list? The Black Crowes and Blues Traveler. Too risque for Joseph Lieberman. Yes. And Lieberman and Bennett also give out a Silver Sewer Award every year to people who put out the most evil, wicked, risque TV shows. Do they give it to cops? No. Do they give it to real TV where you can sit around with the family and watch somebody burn to death? No. They gave it to Friends. And admittedly, I have no use for that show either. I mean, it's just, oh, the dramatic, comical lives of super wealthy young yuppies in an apartment way bigger than any apartment I've ever been admitted to in New York. So the Silver Sewer Award went to Friends for the wrong reasons, and Lieberman later admitted he had never seen the show. Earlier this year, Lieberman was on the 700 Club, being all chummy with his old pal Pat Robertson. Robertson patted Lieberman on the head for being an ally in his effort to put religion back in the centerpiece of American life by law. And Lieberman, in return, patted Robertson on the head, saying that in this book that Lieberman had written, he saw the beginning of another spiritual awakening in America. Perhaps that's the rise in the use of psychedelic drugs these days? No. And Lieberman then said to Pat Robertson, "I'm pleased to be talking to you because I think you really have been at the heart of it, in which people return to their religions as a way to build a wall of principle around themselves, to protect themselves and their families from the anything goes mentality." Lieberman went on to say, "I don't think America suffers from too much religion in public life. We suffer from too little of it." Then in the past few days, Lieberman went off again, saying that we are all children of the same awesome God. Awesome, dude. And quoted America's second president and first one to get voted out of office, John Adams, quote, "Our Constitution was made only for a moral and religious people." Then went on to say, "The United States Constitution guarantees freedom of religion, but not freedom from religion." I, for one, am very afraid of the Lieberman-Gore agenda, and people come back and say, well, you can't vote for Ralph Nader, you got to vote for Gore because imagine what Bush is going to do with the American Supreme Court. I look at Lieberman and imagine what Gore is going to do to the Supreme Court if this is what he wants for a vice president, and again, see no choice between Gore and Bush whatsoever. To placate this, Gore, when he came on after the whole Tipper Rocks affair, where Tipper then showed a genuinely moving slideshow / infomercial narrated by Tipper about her life over the years with her beloved Al Gore, right down to the shot of Tipper hanging up the laundry in front of their first home, a mobile home, when Al Gore was in the Army. Then Gore comes out, entering the convention hall like a pro wrestler, from the back, slapping hands with the audience, getting ready to get in the ring or on the stage, which was painted all gray with the exact stripes you see on American Airlines planes going everywhere. No more of this pastel yuppie stuff for the Democrats. This year the Republicans used that, so we're going to be rah-rah patriotic instead. Gore's speech was a genuinely moving speech. I was surprised. He spoke well and came out a lot more forcefully on issues I am concerned about than I ever expected him to. Even vowed to fight big drug companies in the way they gouge people to the point where the price of many prescription drugs in America is 4 to 10 times the price in Canada, let alone in the third world. This is what happens when you privatize health care, ladies and gentlemen. You get a disease industry who figures, these people haven't bought insurance from us, and this is our hospital. Throw them out the door. Let them die. AIDS, you just lost your insurance. Go die. There's not any money in you. Anyway, there was enough of this coming from Gore that God, if I closed my eyes, I'd think I was listening to Ralph Nader. Too bad almost every single thing he said in his speech is the exact opposite of his own record. Fight the drug companies? Not Gore. He went down to South Africa to bully President Mbeki into not making generic copies of anti-AIDS drugs or importing cheaper ones from South America, even though there is a badass AIDS epidemic going on in South Africa and in the African continent right now. 1 in 10 in South Africa, 1 in 4 or 5 in Zimbabwe, supposedly 1 in 3 in Botswana. But Gore's main purpose is not to save people's lives, it's to save drug companies' money. Let your people die, President Mbeki, otherwise we're going to sick the WTO on you. That was Gore's message. He later went back on that due to public outcry, but that is where this guy's instincts lie. So there was the usual pomp and circumstance, trying to make it like the old exciting conventions when there was more than one candidate and real issues were debated at the podium on the convention floor. Not anymore. Just like the coronation of King George II, this was the coronation of Prince Albert. They waved their Tipper Rock signs. Then on cue, when Lieberman came out for a second, they all said, "Go, Joe, go! Go, Joe, go!" And sure enough, the marquees were flashing, "Go, Joe, go! Go, Joe, go!" This is what you're supposed to do, game show audience. Then at the end, of course, the balloons fell, and I kept thinking, oh, please let it rain so many balloons, it drowns all these delegates. But far from it, hardly any of the balloons were falling, and from where I was sitting, I could see the workmen in the rafters of the Staples Center yelling instructions to each other, shaking the balloon nets, trying to get them to fall. Where was Survival Research Labs when we needed them? And then, as Gore went off into the sunset, smooching Tipper, and of course, the kiss is discussed more in the editorial pages of America's newspapers than the policies. That's what dumbed down corporate media is all about. Day after day debating how Al kissed Tipper. Then I got back down to the floor level. I couldn't get a floor pass back in, but the delegates were exiting, so I interviewed them. Well, what excites you about Al Gore? And it was like, oh, he's a great environmentalist. Oh, he's against the drug companies. Oh, he's against the oil companies and big business. They all believed what they wanted to believe and fixated it on this guy. And I asked them, well, have you contrasted this to Gore's actual record on these issues? And the answer 75% of the time was no. All surprised I would even ask them such a question. And so then I asked them, well, does Tipper rock? Oh, yeah, Tipper rocks, man. Yeah, Tipper rocks. Old ladies, oh, I think she rocks. Younger people who should know better, yeah, she really rocks, man. There it was, triumph of the will, Democratic style. I mean, they tried to make that big rush of energy when Gore entered the room. So it's sort of half triumph of the will, half arena rock, trying to get people to cheer wildly at different points. And when Gore went on, I mean, I just didn't feel the same groundswell of emotion and energy as when I went to my very first arena rock show when I was in 9th grade to see Alice Cooper. And when he finally came on, I was like, my jaw just dropped. Oh my God, right there, it really is Alice Cooper. No matter what they did to orchestrate the event, that just didn't happen with me when Gore came into the room. So Al Gore, you're no Alice Cooper. But why Gore pushed that many buttons that I supported was obviously he's feeling the pressure both from the protests and from the Nader candidacy. So much pressure that they're now fighting like crazy to keep Nader out of the televised presidential debates this fall. It used to be if you had over 5% in the opinion polls, they'd let you in. Thus Perot got in '92 and John Anderson in 1980. But as soon as Nader went over 5%, suddenly the bar is raised to 15%. And the excuse they were using was, well, our sponsor, Anheuser-Busch Brewery, makers of Budweiser and other fine liquid that gives me a migraine every time I sip one of their products, says 15%, and it's the sponsor's rule. We can't change the sponsor's rule. What a great metaphor for how the Republicrats run, or should I say forget to run, the world. We can't cross the wishes of our sponsors, can we? Here we are at the gates of the great and powerful Oz, and we have come for your children. We are the real politically incorrect. Our lives are not charmed. We work for a living. When was the last time you admitted we even exist? Roseanne? Taxi? Sanford and Son? Jerry Springer. Our kids are not Gap kids. Our young people are not teenage witches. Nor are they clueless to the fact that they neither have nor want anything in common with Dawson's Creek, Popular, or Spoiled White Rich Babies 90210. We see no difference between Michael Jordan, Tiger Woods, and Ronald McDonald. We will not knuckle under to your devious children's programming, whose sole message is to buy ever more officially overpriced merchandise and toys. And the relentless branding of little kids to the point where they're teased and ostracized at school because the logo on their shirt don't match the logo on their shoes. Or worse yet, their mama can't afford those expensive Tommy brand name clothes in the first place. And we will not let Campbell's Soup, Old Navy, MTV, or anyone else hammer into the minds of girls as young as 6 years old that they should always hate their bodies and always be on a diet. The people own the airwaves, remember? The lifestyles of the rich and famous can kiss our funky booty hole. We have nothing in common with Mad About You, bulimic Barbie doll pop stars, or those nauseating yuppies on Friends. Our friends have never seen the inside of a Manhattan apartment that big, have you? Our lives are less likely to be touched by an angel than by a 30-day eviction notice from landlords so greedy they should be lynched, bulldozing us from the cities we give life to in the first place, so more .com cowboys can seize our homes and tootle around spitting money in everyone else's face. We don't care who wins on Survivor. We care about surviving corporate-sponsored global warming and an ozone turned into Swiss cheese that you won't even admit is a problem. We don't care who's porking whom on Melrose Place or even in the West Wing. We know the real scandals include 4 out of 5 Americans deliberately locked out of your mirage of an economic boom. As Michael Franti put it, I don't care who they're screwing in private. I want to know who they're screwing in public. ER. Chicago Hope. Gosh, I'm so touched. What about all the people turned away from real ERs and can't see a doctor at all because they can't afford no insurance?
We know real world is not the real world. I recently met a woman named Irene McGee who quit this show and said not even the house was real. The fridges were all filled to the brim with Vlasic pickles, delivered daily by the crate load along with gallons of Nantucket nectar. If she drank anything else, the crew took it from her hand and made sure the Nantucket nectar label was facing the camera instead. When she walked out, another guy in the cast of Real World hit her, and the camera crew did nothing. Who cares if she's in danger? We're out scooping Jerry Springer. When she spoke out, MTV sued her. And Entertainment Weekly rated Irene getting smash-mouthed the 47th most interesting event on TV that whole year. Come on, MTV. Far as I'm concerned, Beavis and Butthead and Dora are the only good things you ever did. But can't you think of a better way to raise audience awareness of domestic violence than to make it look cool? Home improvement. How about it? Throw the TV out the window. No, not quite. We don't hate the media. We've become the media. What responsible use of the internet, pirate radio and micropower, punk and hip-hop nation, independent music, publishing, film, and now television have accomplished so far is only the tip of the iceberg. Or is it a mushroom cloud? More and more often, the camcorder truth jihad will catch you beating innocent people for marching peacefully or driving while black. Illuminate your blowjobs not from interns but from money bags. They make cameras small as grasshoppers now, and they will slip inside your prisons, toxic dumps and sweatshops, all the way up to your boardrooms. We will bring people together against your whole goddamn agenda because you have given Earth's life forms nowhere else to go. Giving a damn about the world around us and doing something about it is not an antique roadshow. We demand fair and more accurate, balanced news coverage. Real people with real lives in your dramas and on your talk shows. And if we don't get it, we'll make it ourselves. We know we can do better than you. And as King George W. Bush II once said, we will. As the world turns, our guiding light will be to take back and improve the days of our lives, knowing each one life to live matters. Welcome to our Spin City, little homeless shelter on the prairie. Survivor, where contestants try to feed their families on a skinflint Clinton Gingrich Gore welfare check. Mary Tyler Moore stuck in endless dead-end temp jobs with no time off or benefits at all. We got all kinds of cures for your sitcoms, so boring they're not even funny anymore, and Letterman's very existence and third product placement from the Sun. We'll exile Jesse Helms to the Munsters. George W. Gore and Arianna Huffington are the new cast of Green Acres. ER goes to Somalia, while Baywatch goes to Burma. Kathy Lee presents the lighter side of East Timor, while Oprah models swimsuits on location at Superfund sites. You give us the world's wildest police chases, we'll give you the world's wildest police brutality cases. Nash Bridges finally busts Willie Brown. Cigarette Man in the X-Files turns out to be Dianne Feinstein. And behind the scenes, the cause of it all is Paul from the Diamond Center. Our idea of the world's funniest home videos is the Fortune 500 sinking into the sea. You push game shows called Greed and Who Wants to Be a Millionaire. How about Who Wants to Jail a Millionaire? Storm the gates of the Bastille of the wonderful world of Disney. The vampire we are out to slay is you. Turn AOL Time Warner over to Ad Busters. Hand the reins of CNN to me. Replace Rupert Murdoch with Marilyn Manson. We are everywhere and we won't go away. We will not go quietly and shut up and shop. We will boycott you and boycott your sponsors, sabotage them at work, and raise our kids unafraid to show that they're smart. Enough to see through the pop junk you puke out. Not an icon to stir them, even Mickey Mouse. Earth, the final conflict. Corporations versus life itself. And time is running out. But we're not running, are we? To the Hilton, where the National Association of Lousy Broadcasters is trashing Marconi's name by giving out Marconi Awards as we speak. Charge! Peace.
All right, cell phones for a second. You've seen the Beavis and Butthead episode where Beavis gets an order on the phone and throws the phone in the French fry fryer? Every time I see somebody walking down the street with a phone, I want to just walk up to them and throw it in the nearest French fry fryer. Or imagine a day of protest against cell phone people, especially the ones who drive bad in their SUVs as a result. Where all over the country, people run up and grab phones out of people's hands and just run around the block with them for a while. To avoid an aggravated robbery charge, you then hand it back. But still, not just the Joker, but think of if everybody became Harpo Marx for a day every once in a while.